I own this town. Nathan Cole said it loud enough for the whole bank to hear. He stood there, confident, smiling, surrounded by retirees and mothers with children. No one argued. No one interrupted. Then the bank manager stepped forward. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult him. He simply took Nathan's platinum card and cut it in half. The silence afterward wasn't respect. It was the sound of a lie, finally dying. Nathan Cole looked like money. That was the point. Everything about him was designed to communicate one message. This man has won. The perfectly trimmed beard, the expensive shirt that fit just right, the heavy watch on his wrist that caught the light when he gestured, which he did often because Nathan was always performing. He lived in one of those mid-sized wealthy towns in inland California, the kind of place where everyone knows each other just enough to gossip, but not enough to help when things fall apart. The kind of town where reputation isn't built on what you do, but on what people believe you can do. And Nathan Cole had mastered the art of belief. He wasn't rich in the traditional sense. He didn't own factories or real estate empires. He had something more intangible and, in his world, more valuable: social power. He was the guy who showed up at every ribbon-cutting ceremony, the guy who had a reserved table at the best restaurant without asking, the guy whose name was known by security guards, waiters, real estate agents, and bank managers. Nathan had spent 2 decades turning himself into a brand, and the brand was simple: untouchable. But here's the thing about power built on perception. It only works as long as everyone agrees to see it. And Nathan Cole was about to discover what happens when the agreement ends.
Welcome to Money Stories That Matter, where we explore the moments when financial reality crashes into carefully constructed illusions. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because today's story is about the exact moment when a man's entire world collapsed in the most public way imaginable. And I want you to stick around until the end, because the real question isn't what destroyed Nathan Cole. It's what he destroyed to keep his image alive for so long. From the outside, Nathan Cole looked solid. Inside, he was leveraged to the breaking point. His business was officially called Cole Consulting, but in reality, it was a patchwork of commissions, referrals, and promises of future deals. Some months were good, some months were holes. The problem was that Nathan didn't live like someone with irregular income. He lived like someone who needed the town to believe he was always climbing. And to maintain that illusion, he carried an invisible architecture of financial leverage: premium credit cards cycling between each other, credit lines constantly rotating, payment schedules hidden in calendars, renegotiations handled with calm phone calls where he'd say, "No problem, let's adjust." Nathan had become an expert in a very specific art: appearing stable while crumbling. He also had a family, not a magazine-perfect family, but a family he used as symbols. His wife, Elena, 41, intelligent, elegant, increasingly exhausted, not just from the work of maintaining a home, but from the work of maintaining the version of her husband that the world bought into. And there was a daughter, Sophie, 12 years old, that age when children start noticing the cracks, not because someone tells them, but because they feel the climate of the house shifting. Sophie was the only person who could disarm Nathan without arguing, not because she was strong, but because she was real. And for someone addicted to control, that was dangerously uncomfortable.
The morning it all came apart started like any other performance. Nathan had a plan. A big client was about to close, a fat commission was coming, and everything would get back on track. He just needed one thing. The bank had to approve a credit adjustment, release a limit, bridge the gap until the money came through. For Nathan, this was routine. He'd done it before. The bank always figured it out. And if they didn't, someone would call someone. Nathan lived in this logic: if you're important enough, the world bends. So he walked into the bank like he was walking into a restaurant where he was known. He didn't take a number, he didn't wait, he didn't ask, he declared. And the bank was full. Regular customers, retirees, mothers with children, small business owners, employees rushing around with papers. Nathan liked this because Nathan liked an audience. He liked being seen. He liked being the man who walked past the line and received a "Good morning, Mr. Cole," as if it were natural. But that day, something was different. The employees were tense. There were glances that looked away too quickly. And when Nathan demanded to speak with the manager, the usual response didn't come. Instead, there was silence, delay, and finally, Martin Hale appeared. Not rushed, not nervous. He appeared like someone who had already made a decision before Nathan even walked in. Martin Hale was 52, the manager of the town's most traditional bank, the kind of man who spoke softly and chose words like someone cutting expensive fabric, wasting nothing. Martin didn't have Nathan's charisma. He had something else, quiet authority. He was respected not because he imposed himself, but because he didn't need to. And unlike everyone around Nathan, Martin had access to what no one else saw, the numbers behind the shine. The shock was this: Nathan thought he was going to negotiate. Martin wasn't there to negotiate. Martin was there to end it.
Nathan tried everything that had always worked. Charm, veiled threats, irony, status. He spoke loud enough for other people to hear. He dropped phrases with half a smile. "You know who I am." And when he realized he wasn't gaining control, he raised his voice. That's when he exploded, like someone delivering the final blow in an argument that shouldn't exist. "I owned this town." And Martin, instead of backing down, did something no one ever did with Nathan. He didn't react emotionally. He reacted administratively. What happened next was public and irreversible. Martin informed him, right there, in front of everyone, that Nathan's cards had been blocked, that the account was under review, that there were serious outstanding issues, and that by bank policy and by formal decision, the card would be canceled at that moment. The gesture that humiliated Nathan wasn't an insult. It was a procedure. Martin took the card, held it for a second, like someone holding something that no longer meant anything, and then cut it. One clean cut. Then another. And the room, which seconds before had been full of noise, became that heavy silence that isn't respect. It's shock. What made this devastating wasn't just the loss of credit. It was the loss of character. Nathan had built his identity on the idea that money solves everything. When the card was cut, in front of strangers, he lost something that couldn't be bought back. The collective illusion. People watched. Some pretended not to. Others stared openly. An elderly woman near the deposit slips whispered to her companion. A young mother pulled her child closer, as if witnessing something inappropriate. The bank employees froze, caught between professional duty and human fascination with catastrophe. And Nathan stood there, his hand still extended from when he'd handed over the card, now holding nothing but air and humiliation.
But the story isn't just about a rich man being humbled. The emotional engine is what this revealed. Nathan wasn't in a small crisis. He was in a crisis he'd hidden from his wife, his daughter, his friends, and maybe even from his own body. And the public incident forced the questions he'd been postponing. Where did the debt come from? What had he done to maintain the lifestyle? Who had he deceived? Who had he sacrificed? And why? Nathan left the bank with empty hands and a burning face, feeling something he'd never truly felt before. He wasn't just without credit. He was without narrative. And when he reached the parking lot, his phone vibrated with messages, because in a town like this, the fall of an important man isn't a secret. It's entertainment. It's judgment. It's social sentencing. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of Nathan's life. His hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The phone kept buzzing. He didn't look at it. He knew what it was. In a town this size, news traveled faster than sympathy. Someone in that bank had already told someone who told someone else, and now the story was multiplying, mutating, growing teeth. By the time Nathan pulled into his driveway, at least 40 people knew. By dinner, it would be 200. By tomorrow, it would be the only thing anyone talked about. Elena was in the kitchen when he walked in. She looked up from her laptop, saw his face, and knew immediately that something had broken. "What happened?" she asked. Nathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because how do you tell your wife that the life you've been selling her, the security, the status, the careful construction of success, was all built on borrowed time and borrowed money? How do you admit that every dinner out, every vacation, every private school tuition payment was actually a piece of a dead puzzle that just collapsed? "The bank," he finally said. "Martin Hale. He would."
He cut up my card in front of everyone. Elena went very still. That particular kind of stillness that comes before an earthquake. "Which card?" "All of them. The accounts are frozen. He said there are outstanding issues." "Outstanding issues." Elena repeated the words slowly, like she was translating a foreign language. "Nathan, what does that mean? How much do we owe?" And there it was. The question he'd been avoiding for 3 years. The number he'd been moving around like a shell game, shifting balances, making minimum payments, opening new credit lines to pay old ones, always one step ahead of the math catching up. "I can fix this," Nathan said. "The Morrison deal is about to close. That commission alone will—" "How much, Nathan? It's complicated. It's not a simple number. There are different accounts, different—" "How much?" Sophie appeared in the doorway, her backpack still on, eyes wide. She'd heard her mother yell, which almost never happened. Elena saw her daughter and took a breath, forcing her voice back down. "Go to your room, baby. Dad and I need to talk." Sophie didn't move. She looked at her father with an expression Nathan had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something worse. Pity. That night, Nathan sat in his home office, staring at spreadsheets he'd been too afraid to look at honestly for months. The truth was uglier than he'd let himself believe. The debt wasn't just large, it was catastrophic. And the Morrison deal, the one he'd been counting on to save everything, had fallen through 2 days ago. He'd been too proud to admit it, even to himself. He'd kept pretending the money was coming, because admitting otherwise would mean admitting the collapse was real. His phone lit up with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Heard about the bank, guess you don't own this town after all." Then another. "Always knew you were a fraud." Then another. "Karma." The town was feeding, and Nathan realized something that made his stomach turn. Some of these people were happy about his fall. People he'd considered friends, people he'd helped, or thought he'd helped, people who smiled at him at parties and now couldn't wait to watch him drown. But the worst message came from someone he did know, Charles Brennan, another consultant in town, someone Nathan had always seen as competition. The message was simple. "I'm sure your clients will need someone to take over their accounts. I'm here to help." The vultures were already circling. Over the next week, Nathan tried to hold the pieces together. He made calls, sent emails, scheduled meetings with people who suddenly weren't available. He tried to leverage relationships that evaporated the moment they smelled weakness. He discovered that the social power he'd spent decades building had a half-life measured in days. When you can't pick up a check, when you can't make an introduction, when you can't be the guy who knows a guy, you stop being useful. And when you stop being useful, in Nathan's world, you stop existing. Elena started asking harder questions. She pulled bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. The more she found, the quieter she became, and that quiet was more terrifying than any argument. Sophie stopped talking to him entirely, not out of anger, but something else, like she'd seen behind a magic trick and couldn't unsee it. The real devastation came 2 weeks later at a town council meeting Nathan had to attend for a client project that was already dead, but he couldn't admit it yet. He walked into the conference room, and the temperature dropped. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People who would have waved him over to their table now suddenly found their phones fascinating. Nathan sat alone at the back, feeling like a ghost haunting his own life.
And then Martin Hale walked in, not to cause trouble, just to attend the meeting. But when Martin saw Nathan, their eyes met, and Nathan saw it clearly. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the cold accounting of consequences. Martin had done his job. The rest was just Nathan's reality catching up to Nathan's choices. After the meeting, as Nathan walked to his car in the dark parking lot, he heard footsteps behind him. "Nathan." He turned. It was David Chin, someone he'd done business with years ago, someone who'd lost money on a deal Nathan had brokered and then walked away from. David had every reason to hate him, to pile on, to enjoy this moment. "I heard what happened," David said, "and I just wanted to say, I know what it's like. I went through something similar 5 years ago, lost everything, had to rebuild from scratch." Nathan blinked. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to have a choice soon. You can spend your energy defending the old story, trying to convince everyone you're still who you were, or you can do something harder." David paused. "You can start telling the truth." "The truth? That you're broke, that you're scared, that you don't have the answers, that you need help." David shrugged. "People respect honesty more than success. They just don't know it until they see it." Nathan drove home with those words looping in his head. That night, he did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He cried. Not quiet tears. Loud, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep and forgotten. Elena heard him from the bedroom but didn't come in. Sometimes the only gift you can give someone is the space to break. The next morning, Nathan walked into the kitchen where Elena and Sophie were eating breakfast in silence. He sat down, and for the first time and maybe ever, he didn't perform. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for lying, for pretending, for making you both live in a story I couldn't afford." Sophie looked up from her cereal. "Are we going to be okay?" "I don't know," Nathan said. And that honesty, that simple admission of not knowing, felt like the first real thing he'd said in years. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Not forgiveness, not yet, but connection. "We'll figure it out," she said. "But no more secrets, no more performing. If we're going to get through this, I need to know the real numbers, all of them." Nathan nodded, and slowly, painfully, he started talking. He told them everything. The debt, the schemes, the credit cards, the desperation, the fear, the shame. And as he talked, something strange happened. The weight got lighter. Not gone, but lighter. The road ahead was brutal. Nathan had to close his business, sell assets, negotiate payment plans, take a job that paid a fraction of what he used to pretend to make. He had to walk through town knowing everyone knew. He had to hear whispers, see smirks, feel judgment. But he also discovered something unexpected. Some people surprised him. Not many, but some. People who'd been through their own collapses and recognized the look. People who offered quiet help without requiring performance in return. And slowly, over months and then years, Nathan Cole rebuilt. Not the image, not the empire, just himself. A smaller life, but a real one. A life where the answer to, "Who are you?" didn't require a credit card or a table reservation. Sophie, years later, would tell people that she got her dad back the day he lost everything else, because the man who came out the other side wasn't the polished,
untouchable figure who'd haunted their home. It was someone smaller, messier, but finally, there.
And Nathan learned the hardest lesson of all. You don't own the town. The town doesn't belong to anyone. And the moment you forget that, the moment you confuse respect with fear, admiration with leverage, success with worth, that's when the scissors come out. That's when the card gets cut. That's when you discover that the only thing you ever really owned was the choice to be honest. And that choice, unlike credit, can't be taken away. So here's my question for you, and drop your answer in the comments because I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Have you ever met someone whose entire identity was built on image rather than reality? What happened when that image cracked? And more importantly, what do you think it takes to rebuild after that kind of collapse? Is redemption possible, or are some falls too public to recover from? If you're still watching, thank you for sticking with this story. This is Money Stories That Matter, and these stories matter because they're about the moments when financial truth collides with human pride. If this story made you think, hit that like button. If you want more stories about the real cost of fake success, subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is admit that we're not the story we've been selling. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, your worth isn't in your wallet. It's in what you do when the wallet's empty.